Welcome to today's Explainer. Every 4 years, the entire world watches as millions of Americans cast their votes for a new president. The pageantry, the intense debates, the bold headlines, it's all incredibly visible, right? But what if the biggest, most consequential decisions aren't actually made inside the Oval Office? What if the real power lies somewhere else entirely, operating quietly behind closed doors, far away from those television cameras? Well, today, we're going to pull back the curtain and explore the hidden forces that truly architect American politics.
Okay, let's dive into this. Does the president actually control everything? I mean, a lot of us treat the president as the single most powerful person on the planet. It's incredibly easy to just assume that whoever sits behind that desk has absolute authority over the entire government apparatus. But is that actually how the American system works? To figure that out, we have to look past the political theater and understand the actual machinery that's operating just out of view. So, here's our roadmap for today. We're going to systematically peel back the layers of this system. We'll start with the illusion of absolute power, look at the 3 branches of government, and then uncover the invisible influence of lobbying. After that, we'll hit the high cost of campaigns, explore intelligence and national security, and finally, reveal the true architects of power.
All right, starting us off with Section 1, the illusion of absolute power. The United States is frequently described as the world's most powerful democracy. Citizens are actively electing their local representatives, senators, governors, and of course, the president. But here's the thing, winning an election, that's literally just day one. The U.S. is a sprawling democracy, and governing a nation of over 330 million people is unimaginably complex. You simply cannot effectively run a society of this colossal scale with a single point of authority. Behind every major decision, there's this enormous, intricate network of advisors, agencies, lawmakers, courts, businesses, and interest groups. The American political system was intentionally designed from its very beginning so that no single person, and yes, not even the president, could ever control everything.
Let's move to Section 2, the 3 branches of government. Now, this is the foundational layer of American power. But I don't want you to just think of these as rigid institutions. I want you to think of them as active, dynamic constraints on one another. And this brilliantly illustrates exactly how they interact. We all know the basic executive, legislative, and judicial functions, right? Implementing, creating, and interpreting laws. But the real architecture lies in their check and balance power. Congress can outright reject presidential proposals, the courts can step in and declare those laws unconstitutional, and the president, well, they can veto legislation passed by Congress. This structure absolutely wasn't an accident. It was deliberately engineered to force friction and prevent autocracy.
Which brings us to Section 3, the invisible influence of lobbying.
So those were the highly visible branches of government. But let's shift gears and look at the less understood, somewhat invisible forces that shape the decisions actually made inside those branches. Lobbying is the legal practice of convincing lawmakers to support policies that benefit specific clients. And honestly, these clients aren't just faceless corporations. They include entire industries, labor unions, and nonprofit advocacy organizations. Provided it's conducted under applicable laws and strict disclosure requirements, it is a fully legal, highly structured practice. Lobbyists have a very focused job. They leverage information and relationships to persuade the lawmakers writing the laws to act in the best interests of their clients.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is the sheer financial gravity of this practice. Every single year, literally, billions of dollars are spent on lobbying efforts. We aren't talking about small, grassroots town halls here. We are talking about a massive, highly capitalized industry dedicated entirely to shaping the law long before it ever reaches the president's desk.
Because of that incredible amount of money involved, lobbying is a subject of intense debate. Supporters argue that lobbying is a fundamental right, that it gives citizens and diverse organizations a vital, organized voice in government, allowing them to advocate for their specific needs at the highest possible levels. On the flip side, critics argue that because it requires such vast resources, wealthy interests can gain significantly greater access and influence over lawmakers than ordinary voters ever could. This dynamic tension is a massive part of how American policies are actually drafted and refined.
Let's keep peeling back the layers. Section 4, the high cost of campaigns.
Okay, so lobbyists try to influence politicians once they are already in office, but getting into national office in the first place requires navigating an entirely different layer of the political machine. Running for office in America is extraordinarily expensive. Candidates must raise money from a variety of sources, including individual donors and political action committees. Now, supporters of the current system say that robust fundraising is simply essential. It helps candidates afford the massive costs of effectively communicating their complex platforms to voters across vast geographic areas. Conversely, critics worry that the system is flawed because major donors might secure disproportionate access to elected officials once the campaign actually concludes. The debate over how this money affects the electoral machine remains ongoing and fiercely contested today.
Moving into the shadows for Section 5, Intelligence and National Security. All right, let's uncover another hidden layer of power. This represents a massive sector of government operating predominantly out of the public eye, far away from your typical legislative debates. Agencies like the CIA, the FBI, and the NSA play critical roles in protecting the country. Their jobs are to gather intelligence, investigate crimes, and shield the nation from foreign and domestic threats. However, because the very nature of their work involves highly classified information, they just don't operate with the same transparency as Congress. This operational secrecy means they frequently become the subject of intense public debate and, quite often, endless conspiracy theories.
But it is absolutely essential to ground our understanding in the facts. While some operations must remain secret for valid national security reasons, these agencies do not operate in a vacuum. They are actively overseen through complex legal and governmental mechanisms. They answer to specific congressional committees and are bound by the laws of the land, weaving their operations right back into that initial system of checks and balances we discussed earlier.
Which finally brings us to Section 6, the true architects of power.
We've covered an incredible amount of ground today, and it's time to synthesize these hidden layers to answer that central question we posed at the very beginning. Let's move to Dum-Dum and see how this builds a complete picture showing exactly why the president does not and cannot control everything. First, Congress controls all federal spending. The president can suggest a budget, sure, but Congress actually holds the purse strings. Second, the courts can outright block executive actions if they deem them unconstitutional. Third, the individual states exercise significant independent authority under the Constitution, managing their own unique laws and jurisdictions. And fourth, even within the executive branch itself, there are thousands of career officials whose job is to implement policy regardless of who happens to occupy the Oval Office. When you stack these realities together, it becomes glaringly obvious that governing America truly requires constant negotiation and compromise.
So the crucial point is captured beautifully right here in our source material. American politics isn't controlled by a single individual. Instead, it's shaped by elections, institutions, lawmakers, courts, businesses, advocacy groups, and millions of voters. Understanding how all of these distinct forces interact, conflict, and collaborate really helps explain exactly why major political decisions are often far more complex than they appear on the surface. We've mapped out the vast, intricate web of the American political system today. We've seen the branches, the lobbyists, the campaign donors, and the intelligence agencies, all pulling levers behind the scenes. So, I want to leave you with this final, provocative thought to ponder. The next time you turn on the TV and watch the pageantry of an election, knowing what you know now about the true architects of American power, who do you think truly holds the power? Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. Keep questioning, keep analyzing, and keep learning.